If anything happens to Matthew, you better be sure I'm lying right next to him. Otherwise, I'll come down on you like thunder on the plains." Lines like these captured the soul of Western movies. Gritty, emotional, and powerfully human. The genre had a magic all its own. Sun-scorched towns, high-stakes duels, and lone riders chasing justice across the frontier. Western film stars weren't just actors, they were cultural legends. With their wide-brimmed hats and steely gazes, they came to symbolize courage, independence, and the rebellious heart of the Wild West. But over time, these icons began to disappear from screens and from memory. Some bowed out gracefully, others faded without a trace. A few were taken too soon, leaving fans to wonder what might have been. Why did these stars vanish? What happened to them after the spotlight dimmed? The golden age of Westerns gave us unforgettable faces, but not all of them stayed in Hollywood's good graces. Careers were cut short by personal struggles, industry shifts, or simple bad luck. Today, we dust off those old tales and explore the hidden chapters of these forgotten cowboys. Clint Walker, the towering cowboy. Clint Walker wasn't just an actor playing a cowboy. He was the cowboy. With his towering 6 feet 6 inches frame, deep voice, and chiseled features, he looked like he'd stepped straight out of a frontier legend. You didn't just watch Clint Walker, you believed him. His breakout came with the role of Cheyenne Body in the hit TV series Cheyenne, 1955 to 1963. As a lone adventurer navigating the rough terrains of the Old West, Walker's presence dominated the screen. The show became a phenomenon, and Walker became a household name. At the height of his fame, he was everywhere. Film roles, talk shows, magazine covers, fan events. Kids idolized him. Hollywood banked on him. He wasn't just a cowboy. He was the face of American masculinity in the 1950s and 60s. What made him stand out was that he didn't just act the part, he lived it. He loved horses, thrived in nature, and embraced the tough, self-reliant lifestyle his characters embodied. But as the 1960s turned to the 70s, Hollywood's tastes shifted. Audiences were drawn to grittier, more complex stories. The traditional Western began to fall out of fashion, replaced by urban dramas and anti-hero narratives. Studios moved on, and so did the spotlight. Clint Walker, like many of his peers, found it hard to stay relevant in the changing landscape. Despite his charisma and talent, the genre that had made him a star was fading into history. Yet his legacy as a true Western icon remains unshaken. Despite his immense popularity, Clint Walker began to receive fewer offers. The roles that did come along lacked the spark and scale of his earlier days. As the golden glow of Westerns faded, so too did Hollywood's interest in its former heroes. Rather than chasing the spotlight like so many aging stars, Walker chose a quieter path. He didn't announce a grand retirement, but he also didn't linger where he wasn't wanted. He stepped back with quiet dignity, never desperate, never bitter. Even so, he left behind glimpses of his talent. His roles in The Dirty Dozen, 1967, and The Night of the Grizzly, 1966, reminded audiences of his commanding presence, though neither project could quite recapture the magic of Cheyenne. By the 1980s and 1990s, Walker had all but disappeared from the Hollywood scene. He made rare appearances, mostly for fans or small projects. His final known work came in 1998, when he lent his legendary voice to the animated film Small Soldiers. It was a subtle, poetic goodbye, the cowboy riding off into the sunset one last time. In his later years, Walker embraced peace. He spent time with family, stayed close to nature, and lived far from flashing cameras. While some former stars wrestled with being forgotten, Clint seemed completely at ease. He had already done what few could, become timeless. In 2018, at the age of 90, Clint Walker passed away. His death closed the chapter on a man who had once symbolized everything the American West stood for. Hollywood had long since moved on, but his fans never did. And every time Cheyenne plays on an old TV set somewhere, the legend of Clint Walker rides again. Ken Curtis, the singer who became a cowboy. Before Ken Curtis ever wore a cowboy hat on screen, he was holding a microphone. Long before the dusty trails of Gunsmoke called his name, he was following a different dream: music. Curtis was no ordinary actor. His character Festus Hagen, with his ragged beard, rough twang, and unpolished charm, became one of the most beloved sidekicks in television history. Unlike the stoic, straight-shooting heroes, Festus added humor, heart, and unpredictability to the Western formula. He was the kind of character audiences didn't just watch, they cherished. But what many don't know is that Curtis's path to fame was anything but typical. He began his career as a singer, with a voice that could shift from soft and soulful to bold and energetic. In fact, before acting ever entered the picture, Ken Curtis was making waves in the world of music. He even sang with Tommy Dorsey's band, briefly replacing Frank Sinatra, a fact that still surprises fans today. His transition from crooner to cowboy wasn't immediate, but it showed his incredible range as a performer. Before he ever stepped onto the Gunsmoke set, Ken Curtis was already making a name for himself, not with a gun, but with a guitar. His smooth, soulful voice earned him a spot with one of the most legendary Western music groups of all time, the Sons of the Pioneers. This group was famous for their rich harmonies and cowboy ballads, and Curtis fit right in. His vocals added a warmth and sincerity to their songs that still resonates with Western music lovers. At the time, many believed he was destined for greatness in the world of music, not film. From singer to screen, a star is born. But fate had other plans. Curtis eventually made his way into acting, and his life took a dramatic turn when he was cast in Gunsmoke. At first, he appeared in just a guest role, but it didn't take long for his character, Festus Hagen, to steal the show. Festus was no ordinary cowboy. With his scruffy beard, unique drawl, and quirky mannerisms, he brought a refreshing energy to the series. He was tough when he had to be, but also goofy, kind-hearted, and deeply human. He wasn't the idealized, polished cowboy. He was the one who felt real. It was this complexity that made Festus stand out. He was the kind of character that fans could root for, an underdog with a loyal heart. The Gunsmoke years. Gunsmoke became one of television's longest-running shows, airing for 20 seasons. Curtis joined during the 8th season and remained until the show wrapped up in 1975. By then, Festus was more than just a character. He was family to millions of viewers. But instead of struggling to break free from the shadow of Festus, Curtis embraced his legacy. He understood that times were changing, and instead of trying to force a second act in a transforming Hollywood, he returned to where it all began: music. A peaceful sunset. Unlike many aging stars who fought to stay relevant, Ken Curtis never clung to the limelight. He didn't audition for roles that didn't suit him. Instead, he found joy in reconnecting with fans, performing occasionally and enjoying the quieter rhythms of life. He appreciated what Festus meant to people and never took that connection for granted. Whether it was signing autographs or just sharing a moment with a longtime viewer, Curtis always had time for his fans. He lived the rest of his years with grace and peace, proud of a career that had spanned both stage and screen and had touched hearts in more ways than one. In 1991, Ken Curtis passed away at the age of 74. His death was a somber moment for Western fans, but his legacy remains strong. Even today, reruns of Gunsmoke keep the memory of Festus alive, while his music continues to echo across radios and playlists dedicated to the golden era of Western tunes. Curtis may have ridden off into the sunset, but his voice and his spirit still linger in every laugh, every song, and every dusty trail he once walked. Ken Curtis wasn't just an actor or a singer, he was a true entertainer. Whether he was belting out cowboy ballads or trading banter as Festus on Gunsmoke, he had a gift for connecting with audiences. He didn't chase the spotlight, but wherever he went, he lit it up. Even after stepping back from Hollywood, Curtis continued to bring joy to fans through his music and rare public appearances. His story proves that stepping away from fame doesn't mean stepping out of history. Ken Curtis left behind more than a resume. He left behind a legacy. Robert Horton, the star who walked away. Robert Horton had everything you'd expect from a Hollywood leading man. The looks, the voice, and the kind of magnetic screen presence that made audiences stop and stare. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, he was at the top of his game, best known for his role as Flint McCullough in the hit TV series Wagon Train. The show was a sensation. It captured the raw, adventurous spirit of the Old West, and millions of Americans tuned in every week. Horton's rugged charm made him a fan favorite, and for a time, he seemed unstoppable. But fame is a tricky thing in Hollywood. At the height of his success, Horton did something few stars would dare to do. He left the show. While many actors would have clung to such a successful role, Horton wanted more. He feared being typecast and yearned to explore other creative avenues. It was a bold decision, but one that came at a cost. A gamble that didn't pay off. After Wagon Train, Horton searched for a new foothold. He took on a variety of television roles and even returned to the Western genre with A Man Called Shenandoah in 1965. He played a drifter searching for his identity, a role with promise, but the show failed to catch fire and was canceled after just one season. The magic of Wagon Train had proved hard to recreate. With television doors slowly closing, Horton pivoted to the stage. He starred in musicals and theatrical productions, showcasing his rich baritone voice and love for live performance. While the theater gave him artistic satisfaction, it didn't bring back the fame he once held. Unlike some of his co-stars who successfully transitioned to new roles, Horton struggled to stay in the spotlight. Hollywood was evolving, and fast. By the 1970s, the Western genre was gasping its last breath, replaced by grittier dramas and flashy new trends. And Horton, like so many cowboy icons, was quietly left behind. A graceful exit. Rather than chasing an industry that had moved on, Horton chose a different path. He walked away. There were no dramatic farewells or tabloid headlines. He simply faded from public view, retreating to a life of privacy and peace. While some former stars clung to the spotlight or mourned its loss, Horton seemed to embrace his new reality. He didn't need fame to feel fulfilled. He had already made his mark. Robert Horton lived out his later years away from the cameras, rarely appearing in public. But for those who remembered Wagon Train, his performance as Flint McCullough remained etched in memory, a symbol of strength, independence, and quiet charm. Despite stepping away from acting, Robert Horton remained a beloved figure in the Western community. Reruns of Wagon Train kept his name alive, and die-hard fans still spoke of him with admiration. He occasionally appeared at Western-themed conventions and fan events, where he was always met with warmth and nostalgia. But behind that quiet smile, there was a lingering sense of what could have been. In one of his few candid interviews, Horton admitted something few stars ever do, that walking away from Wagon Train was his biggest regret. He believed he could return to Hollywood on his own terms, but the doors that once opened so easily had now been firmly shut. His bold gamble hadn't paid off. He came to realize that sometimes holding on is braver than letting go. That single decision cost him the momentum of a flourishing career. While his peers moved on to other roles or evolved with the industry, Horton became a fading memory in a town that thrives on the next big one. A quiet goodbye. Robert Horton passed away in 2016 at the age of 91, quietly, without the massive tributes or headline coverage many might expect for someone of his stature. But for fans of the golden Western era, his death marked the closing of yet another legendary chapter. His role as Flint McCullough remains one of the most iconic in television westerns, a performance filled with grit, warmth, and quiet strength. Though his Hollywood journey ended with more questions than answers, his impact remains. Horton's story is a cautionary tale about ambition and timing, how even the most promising careers can falter when the wrong turn is taken. But despite the regret, his legacy endures. He may have walked away too soon, but he never walked out of the hearts of those who grew up watching him ride across the frontier. James Drury, the cowboy who lived the life. James Drury was a Western legend who didn't just play a cowboy, he was one. Best known for his role in The Virginian, television's first 90-minute color Western series, Drury brought a quiet intensity to the screen. With a steely gaze and a no-nonsense demeanor, he became the very image of the noble, rugged cowboy. The Virginian wasn't just a show, it was an institution. For nearly a decade, Drury played the title role, winning hearts with his strong, silent persona and sense of honor. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but he had presence, the kind that didn't need words to command attention. From Hollywood to the heartland. But as the Western genre began to fade, so did the spotlight. When The Virginian ended, Drury didn't cling to fading fame. He didn't jump from audition to audition, hoping to reinvent himself. Instead, he did something far more rare. He embraced the real cowboy life. He left Hollywood behind and focused on ranching and farming, finding purpose in the land rather than in scripts. It was a quiet transformation, but a meaningful one. Drury wasn't pretending anymore. He was living the role he had once portrayed. Occasionally, he'd resurface at Western festivals or rodeo events, warmly greeted by fans who never forgot him. He made appearances at places like Mandan Rodeo Days in North Dakota, talking with fans, taking photos, and reliving memories of his glory days. You go to a small-town rodeo, you get dirt in your teeth, he once joked, smiling through a cowboy's squint. That's the real deal. The final ride. James Drury lived a long and peaceful life, far from the glitz of Hollywood. He passed away in 2020, but he didn't leave behind a career built on fame. He left behind a life of authenticity. Unlike many stars who struggled to transition or fell into obscurity with bitterness, Drury chose a different kind of legacy, one rooted in simplicity, integrity, and the cowboy code he brought to life on screen. In the end, he didn't just play a cowboy, he was one. Dale Robertson, the cowboy who said no to Hollywood. Dale Robertson wasn't just a Western actor, he was a straight shooter in real life too. Known for his tough, no-nonsense characters on screen, Robertson lived by those same principles off-screen. Unlike many actors who played the Hollywood game to stay relevant, Robertson made it clear he had no time for the industry's politics, its ego trips, or its empty promises. In an era when image often mattered more than substance, Robertson refused to compromise. He spoke openly about the fake nature of the business, often criticizing how it treated people. And when the roles stopped coming, he didn't beg. He simply walked away. He returned to his roots in Oklahoma, not out of defeat, but by choice. There, he devoted himself to breeding horses and running his ranch. It was a life of quiet dignity, far removed from the flashing lights of Hollywood. Robertson made only rare public appearances in his later years, but he never once tried to chase fame again. He passed away in 2013, not as a forgotten star, but as a man who had lived life on his own terms. Dale Robertson, the cowboy who said no to Hollywood. Dale Robertson wasn't just a Western actor, he was a straight shooter in real life too. Known for his tough, no-nonsense characters on screen, Robertson lived by those same principles off-screen. Unlike many actors who played the Hollywood game to stay relevant, Robertson made it clear he had no time for the industry's politics, its ego trips, or its empty promises. In an era when image often mattered more than substance, Robertson refused to compromise. He spoke openly about the fake nature of the business, often criticizing how it treated people. And when the roles stopped coming, he didn't beg. He simply walked away. He returned to his roots in Oklahoma, not out of defeat, but by choice. There, he devoted himself to breeding horses and running his ranch. It was a life of quiet dignity, far removed from the flashing lights of Hollywood. Robertson made only rare public appearances in his later years, but he never once tried to chase fame again. He passed away in 2013, not as a forgotten star, but as a man who had lived life on his own terms. Audie Murphy, the hero who couldn't escape his past. Audie Murphy's life was the stuff of legend, but it wasn't the kind that comes with red carpets and movie premieres. Before he ever stepped onto a film set, Murphy was already a national hero, the most decorated American soldier of World War II. His bravery in battle was unmatched. He received every military combat award for valor available from the U.S. Army. And then some. Hollywood saw a story too powerful to ignore and turned him into a star. He brought raw intensity and quiet strength to the screen, playing cowboys and soldiers with a realism few could match. But behind that tough exterior was a man haunted by war. Murphy struggled with PTSD, long before the condition was even fully understood. Though acting gave him an escape, it couldn't erase the scars he carried. As the years went by, roles became fewer, and his internal battles grew heavier. In 1971, Audie Murphy died tragically in a plane crash at the age of just 45. His story remains one of both unimaginable triumph and heartbreaking tragedy, a reminder that even the strongest heroes carry wounds we may never see. Fade to dust, the legacy of Western icons. These men, Clint Walker, Ken Curtis, Robert Horton, James Drury, Dale Robertson, and Audie Murphy, once ruled the frontier of television and film. They were the faces of honor, grit, and justice. They didn't just act in Westerns, they were Westerns. But time, as always, moved on. The Western genre faded, roles dried up, the spotlight dimmed. Some stars bowed out gracefully, others struggled. A few vanished without a trace. Yet none of them were truly forgotten. Their movies still echo with the thunder of hooves, their voices still ride the wind, and their legacy, that dusty, rugged, larger-than-life legend, still inspires generations who long for a time when heroes rode tall and justice came with a six-shooter. Because some stars don't burn out, they ride into legend. If you love classic westerns and legendary stars, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more amazing Hollywood stories. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a ride back into the golden age. Cowboy hat.